James Love the Destroyer by Phil White and Tip B. Stevens. Global Books, 2014. Part 1. A wizard hath many faces and travels oft to many places. The Grand Mage Josiah, as quoted in Mr. Fun's Balloon and Magic Emporium semi-annual newsletter. Chapter 1. Kneeling in the corner, his LA Fitness t-shirt grazing the industrial tile flooring, Francis Farrington searched for the quarter that had slipped from his grasp. Shit, he thought as it scampered underneath the vending machine. In frustration, he rolled onto his back. His name tag poked into his right breast. After having been locked in the break room in the back of the Hold Your Tongue shoe store all night, he could hear the grumbling of his stomach roaring through the rolls of fat that he had accumulated through the years. 42 to be exact. Now Francis found himself in an unfortunate situation. He was at the mercy of the insistent grumbling in his tummy. The same one he'd let make some very questionable decisions through his long and very lonely life. It was driving him to eat something. Anything. It would be several hours before the mall reopened in the morning. He frantically searched the surrounding area. Now on his feet, he was rooting through the shelves in hopes that one of his fellow employees had left something behind. There was nothing. He was so famished that he had begun hallucinating food products before his very eyes. He then spotted some stacks of crumbling boxes against the furnace. Like a puma, he pounced over a couple of bags of trash that he had previously rifled in and out of. As he drew near the bounty that had been bestowed upon him, his stomach let out one final screech, almost like a victory howl. His mind shut off as he tore the box open. The contents were bags of tiny white pellets marked, "Chew desiccant, do not eat." But the chasm in the middle of his body was in such a fever that it wasn't asking or answering any questions. Cheese puffs, he thought to himself, in his delirium, as he gobbled a few handfuls. His mind began to awaken when he realized that his tongue was starting to grow numb. That didn't stop his eating, for, as has already been stated, his stomach was running this show. Finally, after the box was empty, he collapsed like a bear beginning its hibernation. He felt as though he were a conquering hunter returning to the kingdom. His eyes began to grow heavy, and he drifted away to sleep, hearing his name being chanted by the grateful townspeople. Then his mesmer state was suddenly disturbed. "Awaken!" a voice boomed through the room. Francis's body was frigid and frozen from fright. His eyes bulged as they beheld a specter that spoke from beneath a tattered cloak decorated with stars. "They call you Francis, yes?" A voice crept out crooked and crazy. Like a tortoise trapped on its back, Francis struggled to sit up. Francis found himself so afraid that as he stood up, he noticed that the floor was wet. Then he promptly slid face first onto the hard tile. "Who are you?" he said, dazed. "Well, I am Josiah," he chuckled. "You have summoned me by eating the salts of Glanduin. Now I am here to bestow upon you the secrets that have been revealed to me throughout my long life, and to challenge you with various quests." He swung his walking stick. "Now, Francis, I won't lie to you, for you are my heir apparent. These quests shall be long and daunting, and truthfully, some might not seem necessary. But trust me, my son, they are all of vital importance. However, they are not for you to know or yet understand. You must accept that fact." A few breaths were taken in silence. Then the master told Francis the tale for which he was there to tell. Many thousands of years ago, two diametrically opposed peoples were at the end of a long, bloody war. The victors of that final battle were the evil Quaxxia. While their numbers have greatly diminished through the eons, there are still some that yet exist. Somehow, they keep eluding us. However, we are very close to eradicating them, which is where you enter my tale. Your rise was foretold to me by Urlok of the Great Forest. He paused and took a deep breath. He told me of one that is not now, but will soon be called James Love the Destroyer. He said this must come to pass, or all will be lost. Have you anything to say, James Love? He whispered as he lowered his cane to the ground. This sounds suspiciously like Scientology. Is this a Scientology recruitment or what? Where's your e-meter? Francis said in a gruff voice. Cyan what? You mean that business with Xenu and the celebrities? That is a completely different galactic civil war. They have top people, like John Travolta, on that conflict. We have our own battles to wage, Sir Francis. Okay, just so long as you don't ask me for any money, Mr. Josiah. With that, Josiah beckoned that Francis kneel before him. Good. Just as you presently kneel, Francis Farrington, you shall rise as James Love, the Destroyer. I will explain the Destroyer part at a later date. As Josiah's walking stick hit the ground, the break room door opened and the night air filled the room. Francis stood and walked to the door. As he exited, he looked around the room. Josiah was gone. However, Francis thought he heard the relentless chime of the store keys faintly clinking in the distance. Chapter 2. It wasn't until the next day, sometime around lunch, that thoughts of what Josiah had said crossed Francis's mind. Francis was digging into a Reuben sandwich that he had just finished preparing. He was about 2.5 hours into a Battlestar Galactica marathon when Josiah suddenly entered the room and stood next to the television. Behold, I appear before you in my awesome presence to begin your vision quest. As he spoke, sparks of inspiration rose in Francis's mind. Why do you say that? Francis said between slurps of soda. I'm sure I can't handle any sort of vision quest, just yet, to be honest. Oh, my son, I have seen into your spirit, and you have proven yourself worthy. So you may perform great feats of which you are not yet aware, Josiah said, as he shook his head from side to side like the pendulum of a great clock. Francis nodded in agreement, again feeling inspired by the mysterious wizard's verve. Well, the first mission I shall entrust you with will be revealed when the clock strikes midnight. You must be situated beneath the large oak tree in the center of town. What's going to happen at midnight? Francis asked. You will see. Oh, and I have laid out some new clothes for you. You will find them on your bed. I trust you will be there when the church bells strike 12, not a second later. He finished speaking and whisked himself away into the dark. As Francis walked through the door, he saw that Josiah was good to his word, for on the bed there was a jet black suit with a tie that matched in kind. The suit seemed to let out a radiating aura, as if the person who wore it would become invulnerable to anything the world could throw at him. He proceeded to put it on. Again, the same sparks shimmered around him, as if he were a newborn opening his eyes for the first time. Everything around him suddenly focused into crisp, clear images. He walked over to the mirror, and there, staring back at him, stood the semblance of a suave gentleman. He stared in amazement at his reflection. James Love the Destroyer, he said to himself. Pleased to meet you. Chapter 3. Francis had a strange feeling deep inside his guts. Along with his newfound fashion sense, he felt something changing inside of him. A voice was screaming from his subconscious. He assured himself it was nothing. Walking in circles, staring at his feet, his mind reeled within itself. He found himself a bundle of boundless energy. He had positioned himself in exactly the spot that Josiah had directed him to. All around was still. It was at that moment that he saw a man in the distance approaching on a bicycle wearing a top hat. He thought to himself, "Oh great, who's this jackalope? Doesn't he know I have a clandestine meeting scheduled?" The man glided up and dismounted his bicycle and walked toward Francis. As he got closer, the moonlight glared across his face. It was President Jimmy Carter. His crooked smile made his appearance very comical to Francis. "Well, hello, kind sir. Might I bother you for the time?" Jimmy Carter said with a gaping Cheshire grin across his face. Francis raised his arm to look at his watch. As his wrist reached eye level, the former president struck. But before he could land a blow, Francis found himself unconsciously countering with an assault that would have made Bruce Lee blush beneath his black belt. He put the elderly president on his back. He leapt on him and raised a fist. "Live or die, man! Live or die!" Francis yelled. A sweat droplet careened off of his nose and landed on the nose of his attacker. As it made squishy contact, Josiah pulled off his novelty mask and revealed himself. Still in Francis's clutches, he smiled. "You can release me now, my friend." Francis stood up and helped the old man to his feet. "Is that you, Josiah?" he asked. "Of course it is, my dear lad. If I might, I'd like to venture to say that you are even greater and stronger than Urlok had prophesied, and more, let us say agile as well." "Ha ha! This means blessed news for our people." Josiah skipped up and down as if a demonic spirit possessed him. "I think that you are prepared to accept the challenge of a quest. I am ready and able to accomplish any quest that you give me. I won't let you down, you'll see," Francis insisted. "As you wish, my squire." Josiah's face grew grim. He lowered his head and he looked into Francis's eyes with a wild stare that sent a shudder down his spine. It was a feeling that Francis rather enjoyed. He felt alive. "If you truly feel that you are prepared for the challenge, I foresee no harm in entrusting you with your first endeavor," Josiah said. "But understand, you must complete this quest to the letter of my asking." Francis nodded. "Whatever you ask, Josiah." "Excellent, my son," Josiah said. Then the sky above them grumbled angrily. "You see, now the creator of the universe has become angered, probably by your prodigious weight," Josiah said from beneath his starry cloak. "Now we have to appease him before we can approach the real source of evil." "Of whom do you speak, master?" Francis asked. "I speak of he who leads me on my journey. His name, all hallowed throughout time, is Jeff," Josiah said as he stood up. "He works in the software department at Cisco Systems downtown. At least, so says the contents of his mailbox," Josiah said as he covered his face in fear of being struck down. "Why do you cower, my master?" Francis asked. "I am sorry. I was just reminded of the parable of the one who besmirched the name of Jeff, and the next day fell off his bicycle, skinning his knee very bad. However, I think he was talking to his friend, who happened to be named Jeff. So now I must rethink the credulity of that statement," Josiah said as he ran his fingers through his scraggly, salty beard. "Well, how do you suggest that we appease this Jeff, God, whoever he is?" Francis asked. "I am afraid only reclaiming a sacred trinket will do now. We have got to find one who possesses such an accursed item, a woman of the night." "What do you mean?" Francis asked. "A harlot who has been corrupted by wearing the jewelry bestowed upon her by the Quaxxia," Josiah explained. "What?" Francis said. "A hooker, man." Josiah raised his voice. "I don't know where to find a hooker," Francis stated plainly. "Don't worry, my son. I know just the place one can be found." Chapter 4. Francis sat on the couch eating some pizza bites that he had just heated up in the microwave. Josiah was in the bedroom. He had removed his hat, uncovering his flowing silver hair. He also removed his blue starry cloak, revealing the in-sync t-shirt beneath. "Come forth, my boy," he beckoned. As Francis approached the room, Josiah hurriedly put his cloak on. "What is it, my master?" Francis said. "Oh, my son, I was praying, and it came to me. I know where we shall meet the harlot." Francis heard the hum of his computer. There, in the glow of the screen, he saw Craigslist. "Who did you speak to?" Francis asked. "In a vision, Urlok of the Great Forest told me of one they call Cindy with an I. She doesn't like it when people misspell her name. And she hates mean people," he said with a flourish. "Master, why are you sweating?" Francis asked as he noticed the moisture running through the back of the chair. "Don't you worry about that. Why don't you worry about the task that I plan to lay out before you?" Josiah said defensively as he stood up. "Oh, and you are most likely going to want to buy a new chair, my son." As Josiah exited the room, Francis looked around the desk. There, sitting atop the table, was a crumpled up tissue. A creepy feeling ran through Francis's mind. He pictured the master vigorously pumping off, an image he would rather be without, truthfully. "Come to me, my son. Something is troubling you, yes?" Josiah said as he put an arm over Francis's shoulder. Francis's spine quivered. "What do you have in mind?" Francis said as a whisper of trepidation encompassed him. "Well, you are going to meet this Cindy, and then retrieve her accursed Quaxxian necklace," Josiah said in a matter-of-fact tone. "Why?" he said. "The will of Jeff is not for us to know or understand. We must only know that is what he wants done, and you have been ordained. You are not questioning Jeff, are you?" Josiah asked. "Because if you want to question His Holiness, I'll give you his phone number at work. He is none too pleased when he is called at work." No, of course not. If that's what Jeff wants, then that's what I'll do," Francis said. "Oh, which reminds me, we have got to work on your speech. We can't have a destroyer presenting thoughts to the world in the manner in which you do," Josiah said. "What do you mean?" Francis asked. "Well, you have to learn to speak as I do. For example, that last sentence would be, 'Of what do you speak?' It's a way to make yourself seem wise and sophisticated," Josiah said. "Also," he continued, "you will need this to protect yourself, the weapon of your forefather, passed down through the ages, the dagger of Lu." Josiah cupped a small object into Francis's hand. It was a rusty pocket knife with a faux wooden handle. Francis looked at the knife, which he immediately recognized. It was engraved in cursive lettering with, "To Lou, from your fellow 1978 Bowling League champs." "That's my dad's pocket knife. You stole it," Francis said, offended. "Yes, you speak the truth. I borrowed the dagger of the grand champion Lou Farrington. It was meant to pass from my very hands to yours. I hope your ancestors can forgive my transgression. Now you have to meet the one they call Cindy with an I. Make haste, my dear boy," Josiah uttered, pointing forward. Chapter 5. She was standing in the parking lot, a bluish hue wafting anxiously from the sign selling 99-cent goods was screaming for attention behind her. With the aim of a drunken archer, she walked in circles, waiting for Francis. Francis approached with more than a hint of trepidation in his step. "You are the one they call Cindy with an I," he said as he got closer to her. "Yeah, that's me," she said. "James, right?" "Yes." Francis could hear Josiah screaming in his mind. "You must speak as I speak." "Well, I am pleased to meet you, Cindy with an I. It is a glorious night, is it not?" "Well done, my son. Indeed you do me proud," he heard Josiah whisper from the nearby shrubbery. "What was that?" Cindy said as she turned her head towards the sound. "It is probably just some homeless man sleeping one off in the bushes," Francis said. "Pay no attention to him." "No, I have had enough of bums sleeping in public places." She picked up a rock and threw it at Josiah. It struck him directly atop his head, knocking off his magician's cap. As Josiah lay on the ground, dazed, Cindy ran up to his limp body and began kicking him mercilessly. "James Love, get this filthy trollop off of me!" Francis's feet almost didn't touch the ground as he bolted over and delivered a swift kick to her back. She collapsed on the ground. "Ah, James Love, my son. I was afraid that my clock had quite literally run out. I am indebted to you, my good man," Josiah said as he replaced his cap on his head. Francis looked around at the empty streets. "It doesn't look like anyone heard our little altercation. What now, master?" he asked. "Well, you must relieve her of that evil necklace purchased from Jared. Then, and only then, will her soul be cleansed of the Quaxxian scourge," Josiah said. "I have to leave now, for I have warrants," he said as he waved his walking stick and vanished into the parking lot. Francis's shadow loomed over her motionless body. He suddenly got very nervous and felt his throat tighten. He fished around her V-neck shirt until he caught hold of a gold chain. Written in a stylish metal cursive was the name Brutus. He grabbed the necklace from around her sausage neck and tried to pull it off, but it would not budge. His mind reeled with terror as she began to awaken. He ran as fast as he could as she stumbled to her feet. As Francis looked back, his eyes met her angry gaze. At this, all of the pizza bites, which he had enjoyed only an hour before, were finding their exit through his mouth. It was safe to say that he did not enjoy them nearly as much on the way out. As he ran, he heard her yelling in the distance, "I am gonna find you, you roly-poly bastard, and I'm gonna stab your punk ass." Her words echoed through the vacant streets.